I'm Steve Olson, the Manager of Training Services for Mesa. In this video, I'd like to share a workflow where we can create IPT files that drive features in other models using a swept solid, and then we can use those same IPT files to generate tools that we will then use in the appropriate tool paths in the CAM environment. I've split the workflow into two separate video segments. So this is part two. We're going to pick up where we left off. I've already created the model by using the solids to generate swept solids that then generate the file that we need. So this is the finished model. We're going to then take it into the CAM environment. Real quickly though, I do want to kind of review the tools that I've created for our model. So if I kind of just go ahead and open up one of the tool files here. This is a simplified version of that tool. I've tried having it with being very detailed, and it ends up not creating the feature appropriately. And so I've kind of just gone with simplified versions, which actually will probably make your life a little bit easier. You don't have to have all those minute details in your simplified versions here. So I'm back to the model here. I'm going to then take us into the CAM environment, and I'm going to create an initial setup here. So I'm going to go to Setup. And if you haven't done any CAM before, basically the first part of the setup is you define the stock and what type of operations you're going to do, and also where you want your stock origin to be. So right now I'm going to tell it's a milling operation. I like to define my origin as a box stock point. So I'll clear the stock point, click this corner over here. I always like to pick the one corner. It just feels a little bit more natural for that. And then on the stock tab here, they very typically do a stock offset. That's kind of like the default version here. In our case here, we're going to just do the tooling of the part like we've already cut it out of a bigger piece of material. So I'm just going to set all my offsets down to 0. So I've got my stock defined. Let's go ahead and do the outer contour. So I'm going to go to 2D contour. I'm going to go to tool. And so it wants me to pick a tool, but I'm actually going to create a brand new tool library, and I'm going to import those tools in. So I'm going to go to my library here. I'm going to right click and say new library, and I'll call it It's a CAD World. And now that I've got that, I can right click, I can say new tool. And I'm going to give this a tool number. I'm going to call this 03, and this will be my edge tool. And I don't really need any coolant in this one here. There's a lot of fine details here. I'm going to keep this really simple. I'm going to go to my cutter tab here. It wants to know what type. If I go down to 4 mil, you'll see that it allows me to import a file. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say import file. I'm going to go to my tools folder where I had those files saved, and here's my 03 tool edge. Say open. You can see it kind of brought it in upside down. Not a big deal. I can flip it over. And it's already got a lot of the good dimensions off the model, so I don't really have to worry too much about this. Also, if you notice that you said, hey, I would rather have this in millimeters or inches, I can control that down here. I do want this to be in inches. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now that I'm gonna use this to drive the first feature. I'm going to use this as my tool for my first feature. So I'm just go ahead and say select. It's going to say, hey, putting something into the library it can't be undone. That's fine. I'll just say OK. So now in my case here, I'm going to go to my geometry. It wants me to pick my contours. So I'm going to pick this upper edge. On my heights tab, I want to set this edge here as being the bottom of the model. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to say selection. It'll allow me to select a reference that's going to be my bottom of my model. Now, one other thing I noticed doing this previously is these corners, the software sometimes tries to round those off. So I'm going to go to my passes tab and make sure you can see here outer corner mode, round around corner. I don't want that. I want to keep my sharp corner because otherwise the bit's going to kind of round this corner and I'm going to have an issue where it didn't get this material right there. So that looks like everything I'm going to do with this toolpath. So I'll say OK. And my habit here is once I create one, I always like to take a look at it here. And let's go ahead and say simulate. And if I play this, you'll see it'll run that. And if we kind of take a quick look here, it's cutting away the material as we expected. And it looks like it's matching that straight on perfectly. You can see it brought the tool in and it's looking pretty good. All right, so I'm going to stop this one and let's do the other tool path. So I'm going to go ahead and say 2D contour. It's going to use the last tool, but I'm going to go over here to tool again. And I'm going to bring another one into my It's a CAD tool library. So I'm going to go ahead and say new tool. And still in the flat mill here, I'm going to switch that over to form mill. Allow me to import a file. Here is my door detail. And that looks right. I don't have to flip it over this time. All the values look right. I'll go ahead and say OK. And actually, one thing I want to do on this one is I do want to edit it because I didn't change any of the names here. I'll call this disable the coolant and then also say, in this case, that this is my door detail. Say OK to that. So now that gives us a little bit better of a naming convention there. And tool 01, I can also name these according to what my machine would have if that's important or it comes out in the programming. So I'm going to go ahead and say select here. Again, that same message, not a big deal. On my contour selection, I'm going to pick one of my contours here of that detail. On the linking tab though, actually on the heights here, I want to set the appropriate height because it always uses the contours as the bottom height, but I want to go back to a selection here. I want to pick the bottom of that detail as my selection. So I'm going to kind of hover here, say select other, and then make sure I pick that face, which that looks like the appropriate face there as being the bottom. That way the tool knows how far it can come down. And then on the linking tab here, I've noticed by default it tries to come in from an angle and kind of then come into that, which in this case I want the tool to come straight down. So I'm going to turn off the lead in and the lead out, because if I don't, it's going to come in from the side and then come in, or it's going to come down and then come in from the side, which is obviously not going to give us the right feature in this case. So I'm going to turn those off. I'm going to say OK. And like I said before, I want to take a look at this and real quickly. By turning off that lead in, lead out, you can see it comes straight down. What I was doing before when I was kind of taking a look at this, it would come in from here and then come over, which obviously was cutting part of the door that I didn't want cut. Let's go ahead and take a look at the simulation of this. I'll hit play, and if I pause it right there, you can see it's doing a pretty good job of cutting that. The features and the tools are looking exactly the way I want them by using these simplified tools. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and that is the workflow. At this point, if I was in my CAM tab and I was happy with these, I could then post-process this. I don't have any material I'm actually planning on cutting, so I don't necessarily need to do that at this point. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. I hope you found the information useful that you can apply to your normal workflows. If you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to email me at my email address there on the screen. And as always, thanks for watching.